What's happening, Packer fans? Welcome into the Pack A Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack A Day Podcast. Appreciate you joining me today. For those of you who are also Wisconsin sports fans, I hope you're hanging in there. Just another banner day in recent Wisconsin sports. Of course, with Giannis's injury, tough game 4 loss. If you're joining me today, hopefully I can somewhat take your mind off of it for a couple seconds, even though I just reminded you of it, so I apologize for that, but definitely not the easiest thing to get over if you're a Wisconsin sports fan. So let's take our eyes off the Bucks for a moment and focus on some Green Bay Packers. And today I'm going to be going over 5 players for the Packers who I consider kind of their glue guys. And what's a glue guy if you're kind of thinking NBA, NFL? What I consider a glue guy is a player that holds the team together. They're kind of the glue of the team. If things maybe start to go wrong, maybe you lose one of your star players in the worst possible moment, this is one of those glue guys that can kind of keep things on the right track, kind of keep things going. It's usually not the superstar. It's usually not the guy that gets a lot of the attention and the accolades, but somebody that is important to the team, the fabric of the team, the foundation, the backbone of the team. And again, that just kind of holds everything together. So no particular order in these 5 players that I'm going to go over today, but I want to start with Lazard. And I think he's just kind of the definition of this type of player, right? One, he immediately earned that respect of Aaron Rodgers and wanted him on the field, which isn't something that comes easy from Aaron Rodgers, as we know. You definitely have to earn that, which Lazard did. You go back to last season, Davante Adams is out against the Saints, tough game on the road. Lazard steps up, has a big game, shows that he's capable of performing in a big primetime game and putting up big numbers. He showed up clutch in 2019 a lot in some situations where Green Bay really needed him to show up. That Detroit game, really one of his, kind of coming out party is another great example of that. But more importantly, it's all the little things that he does. We know that Lazard is one of the better blocking wide receivers in all of football. That helps open things up for Aaron Jones. We know that he's kind of one of those, middle wide receiver type possession receivers, which again, you're the one that's kind of taking some of those big hits over the middle of the field, not to the same extent since they've implemented some of the new rules, but still, it's not exactly a picnic living over the middle of the field. Lazard does that on a variety of different occasions, comes up with big catches on third downs, blocks for his wide receiver peers on the outside on those bubble screens and wide receiver screens. He can do just about everything. He's not usually the huge playmaker, not usually the guy that's going to make, 4 or 5 guys miss after the catch, but he's doing all the work to help everyone around him be better, including Aaron Jones, Davante Adams, Aaron Rodgers, etc. You even see him motion in almost as an H-back at times to be used as a blocker on some occasions, pick some people off either at edge, linebacker, etc. It again helps bring those running backs. So you want to talk about kind of one of those ultimate glue guys. To me, Lazard, a great definition of that. Number 2 on my list, again, not in any particular order, and probably if I were putting the list together 1 through 5, the player who would be number 1 on my list is Marcedes Lewis. To me, this is just your ultimate team player, not in it for the glory, not in it for the the fame and reputation at this point. He's just doing everything in his power at all times to make the players around him better, to make sure that this team is successful, to make sure that the play gets executed the way that it's supposed to. And he is just a picture-perfect definition of that. I mean, as a tight end, watching what he does as a blocker, and I mentioned this numerous times last year, there are so many times on film where he's matched up one-on-one with an edge rusher. And then they've got a player backing him up. Sometimes it's the right tackle who's checking something inside and then is set to, back up Marcedes Lewis, who is just kind of taking the initial assignment. Sometimes it's a running back. Marcedes Lewis might be blocking him up front, and then the running back comes after to help out as needed. But there are so many of those times on tape where that second player is never needed, whether it's the running back, the offensive tackle, because Marcedes Lewis is blocking edge players and linebackers and blitzers one-on-one as if he were an offensive tackle. It is incredible to watch. You watch him in pass protection, you watch him as a run blocker, you watch him just literally move people off the line of scrimmage at that position. Again, we know that he's not going to be the most agile player in the open field anymore. Every once in a while, he get one of those tight end screens and you're just watching that play develop in slow motion as he kind of lumbers down the field. He's not going to be a threat, again, over the middle of the field other than maybe just a possession type guy. We saw him get used a little bit as a red zone threat, but all of that is secondary and tertiary to what his responsibility is. And that's just being a fantastic blocker, being a fantastic teammate, and again, making those players around him better, like Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, Jamal Williams a season ago, etc., and making Aaron Rodgers better too by, again, giving him that extra layer of pass protection on the outside. There's very few, if any, players like Mercedes Lewis in the NFL, and what he's able to do and bring to this offense is definitely worthy of being one of these 5 ultimate glue guys. Number 3 on my list, again, you could easily paint a picture of being the definition of holding things together. Maybe a little bit more of a star than a lot of these players that are considered glue guys usually are, but how do you not recognize Elgton Jenkins as being one of the glue guys of this team? I mean, literally, there are players that maybe get the opportunity to play 4 or 5 positions along the offensive line. There are few, if any of them, that can play 4 or 5 positions along the offensive line play it well enough to actually be considered a good offensive lineman at any of those positions. And Elgton Jenkins can play 5 positions, and he can play 5 of them well. And we saw last year just how valuable that trait was. And I think we're going to see another incredible instance of that this year, especially with Bakhtiari starting probably on the injured list, and then having a variety of interior offensive players and different, they can do a variety of things with Billy Turner and Royce Newman, Lucas Patrick. There's all those players that have versatility, none like Elgton Jenkins. So you start with him, like, where do you want to put him first, and then kind of figure it out. Or actually, you probably reverse engineer it. I probably am mistaken there. You probably figure out where everyone else is best first, and then just slot in Elgton Jenkins where you need him. Whatever's left over, put him there, and you have that position covered. And also, I think what Matt LaFleur's been able to do at times, and I know this because I've seen him use Jenkins in a couple different scenarios with the same 5 offensive linemen, is pick where it's most important to have Elgton Jenkins in that game. Against the Rams and Aaron Donald, you might want him inside a little bit more. If you need an outside player against the Bears and Khalil Mack, you might want him outside a little bit more. And allowing him the versatility to play multiple positions and play them well gives Matt LaFleur a ton of options along that offensive line and with his offense. And again, I think that's just a major kudos to Elgton Jenkins for being able to do that. But again, I don't think you can say anything besides that being literally the definition of a glue guy along your offensive line. Defensive line is similar. Again, this is a star player, but he holds the front of the defense together, and that's Kenny Clark. Again, usually a glue guy is more the not so hyped up players, and obviously Kenny Clark deservedly gets quite a bit of hype for his play at defensive tackle, but I've said for a while now, and you guys who are listening to this probably know this, but I shudder to think of what happens to this defense without Kenny Clark in the middle of it. And to me, how this entire Packers defense at least has been set up, we'll see what it looks like under Joe Barry, but based on the personnel, I think it's going to be something similar. It starts with Kenny Clark in the middle of that defensive line, because the old adage in the NFL defensively is that you start from the inside out. So you start strong in the middle and then work your way outside, meaning you want good nose tackle or defensive tackles, good inside linebacker or inside linebackers, good safeties. If you're strong up the middle, you can survive on the edges. Now, that's evolved a little bit over time, but the Packers defense starts with Kenny Clark basically as the centering point of their entire defense, because without Kenny Clark, you have an interior of Kingsley Keke, Dean Lowry, the rest of the names with Chris Barnes, maybe Devondre Campbell, Kamal Martin. Like, without Kenny Clark, that middle interior at linebacker and defensive line is as weak as any combined unit in the entire NFL. I mean, it would be disastrous in my opinion, whether it's Lancaster, Lowry, Keke, TJ Slayton, Chris Barnes, Kamal Martin, Ty Summers, Devondre Campbell. That group as a whole, without Kenny Clark, is very scary on the inside. Now you insert Kenny Clark in the middle of that, and in a way, everything starts looking okay, because it's so hard to run up the middle of the field now with Kenny Clark, and now all of a sudden, you have to work the edges a little bit more, which gets you into Rashawn Gary, Zadarius Smith territory, and that certainly changes the outcome of how your defense operates. With Kenny Clark, you've got a chance in the middle of that defense with the rest of those guys. Without Kenny Clark, it becomes much more difficult. So he's the glue that keeps the entire interior of that defense intact, which allows Green Bay to do everything else that they want to do on defense. So again, I don't know how you could say that's anything but the glue holding the rest of that defense together, and that being Kenny Clark. Then add to the fact that he can play defensive tackle, he can play nose tackle, he can play more of an under technique, he can play a one right over the center, he can be more of a bull rush, get up the field sort of guy, he can be a little bit more of a slow burn sort of guy, he can hold up at the point of attack against the run. I've even seen him at edge try to collapse pockets and run stunts and twists and things like that. So there are a lot of things that Kenny Clark can do, but he is unequivocally and unquestionably the guy in the middle of that defense that holds everything together. And then last on my list is Adrian Amos. And when I went back, when Amos originally signed with the Packers, one of the things that I noted about him is one of the reasons that Eddie Jackson was so good was because of Adrian Amos. Amos didn't get a lot of the accolades and notoriety. It was Eddie Jackson. But Eddie Jackson was able to fly around and scream to the football and be a playmaker because Adrian Amos put the safe in safety. Like literally, he was the guy that was playing back more often and making sure that they weren't allowing big plays, getting over the top of coverage when he needed to, making sure tackles. His safety, his safeness at safety allowed Eddie Jackson to play, I'm going to say reckless, but I mean it in a very positive way. Like let him play instinctual, fast football, which is exactly what suited Eddie Jackson so well. The star was Eddie Jackson, but the glue that made that star, the player that helped make that star was Adrian Amos. And you look at what happened to Eddie Jackson after Adrian Amos left. He's still a good football player, don't get me wrong, but hasn't been the same level of player since Amos left that team. And I see the same thing a little bit now with Darnell Savage, especially this past season, where Amos was a little bit more of, hey, I'm going to do a little bit of everything. I'm going to be kind of the safe guy. You go make the plays. And we saw Savage play a little bit more instinctive. We saw him become a playmaker. And we saw that evolution of Darnell Savage throughout the course of last season. That's in large part to what Adrian Amos is able to accomplish as his tag team partner back there at safety. Add into the fact that we also saw him start playing some nickel linebacker later in the season, that he can be that guy that comes up from a safety and comes on down like Savage did. The fact that he can play a deeper safety, like the fact that he can do all of those things makes it that much more valuable again for everyone else surrounding him on defense. And the fact that he does all of it at such a high level and that he helps avoid, some of those big plays from the opposing offense with his play back there at safety. You put all of that together and he's kind of the glue guy that holds the back end of that defense together, similarly to what Kenny Clark does on the front end of the defense. So he is a player that, again, I really think he's due for a breakout season. He does everything right. And one of these seasons, he's just going to see the ball start coming his way, get some interceptions because he's just overdue because he's always in the right spot at the right time. And usually when that happens and you're doing all the right things, the ball tends to find you. I really feel like Amos is due for a really big season this year, and I'm excited to see how he plays this upcoming season. So those are the 5 guys that I've got: Allen Lazard, Mercedes Lewis, Elton Jenkins, Kenny Clark, Adrian Amos, that kind of make everything work on the offense and defensive side of the ball. 2 players that I'm keeping an eye on moving forward, who I'm hoping are on this list sooner rather than later. On the offensive side of the ball, Josiah DeGuara. Like his draft status and the reason they drafted him was basically to be the ultimate glue guy. Help everyone else. Be a fullback. Be a tight end. Line out wide if you need to. But it's all in an effort to help everyone else on offense, being that Kyle Juszczyk type of player. So we'll see what happens when we see Josiah DeGuara in a full season, hopefully this upcoming season. But he's literally drafted as a quote unquote glue guy. So hopefully he can be added to that list sooner rather than later. And then the other one on defense is Chris Barnes, who I was tempted to put on this list anyway, mostly because this defense was better last year when he was the guy that was on the field at all times. I still think he has obviously a ways to go in his development, but his ability to play a couple different linebacker spots, his ability to stay on the field in coverage, his ability to play on rundowns, he really was a guy towards the end of last season that was kind of holding together the middle of that defense and becoming that play caller and doing a variety of different things. So I want to see him progress more, but I'm hopeful that he can eventually be a guy that, we've seen Amos on the third level, Kenny Clark on the first level. Now, if Chris Barnes can become that on the second level, that would be a huge step for that Packers defense. So that's going to do it for me today. Those are my Packer glue guys. Hope you enjoyed this episode. I'll be right back here tomorrow, so make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure to check out Dusty, Steve, and Sarah on today's audio version of the podcast. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.